Each year, the editors of Journal of Ecology honor an ecologist in our Eminent Ecologist series. And these individuals are hugely influential within their fields of research and have made outstanding contributions, not just to the Journal of Ecology, but to ecology in general. This year, the award has been made to Hans Cornelissen from the Free University in Amsterdam for his contributions to our understanding of functional trait variation and its role in plant and ecosystem functioning. So many congratulations, Hans, and also welcome to this interview where we hope to learn a little bit about your work, what motivates you and what motivated you to become a plant ecologist, and also a bit about your plans for the future. So I guess the most thing I'd like to ask first is, how did you get into ecology in the first place?
Okay, yeah, that's a good first question to start with, Richard. And by the way, thanks again for inviting me and selecting me for this award, because it was genuinely a great surprise, and I was yeah, amazed and also super happy, to be in the company of some previous eminent ecologists. So I felt very humbled, but really happy. And about your question, how did I get into plant ecology? Actually, I never planned to be a plant ecologist in the first place. I've been a passionate bird watcher from about 11 years old, so almost 50 years, so which makes me feel really old. And my aim in life as a teenager was always to become a full-time professional bird watcher for the rest of my life. So it was very obvious that I had to study biology in order to get there. And once I got to the uni, attending all these different courses, it turned out that actually birds were not the only interesting thing, and actually a lot of things like plants were also very interesting. And gradually I got more and more interested in plant ecology through these courses, and so then gradually, the bird watching remained a hobby, while plant ecology sort of became more important for the rest of my career.
Yeah, and do you still, bird watching is still a key part?
Yes, I go out whenever. I am obviously super busy, but I go out whenever I get the chance, often, the earliest hours of the morning, even before work, just because I find it super relaxing, and also I find that being out and about gives you new ideas. You just ponder about things, and you're free to think, and when you're out in some beautiful nature, I think that's where it all starts, also for plant ecology. So for me, bird watching is a hobby, but I also look at other things while out. Obviously, I really love plants as well, and landscapes. But I think also, it's kind of a generator of ideas, being out there, and but maybe that's also, already something maybe you would like to tackle later on. But the message to the younger people, don't forget to just have fun outside, to look around and observe and see how beautiful everything is, because that's how you get new ideas in science, I think.
Yeah, we'll certainly come to that later on in the interview.
Jumping the gun here.
No, it's okay. I mean, you've listed, included 12 papers we asked you that you've published in Journal of Ecology, and they cover quite a wide range of topics, but central to all of them are leaf traits or traits of bark, wood, leaf material, and decomposition processes or other process. And I guess a related question to what we just asked you is, how did you leap from ecology to looking at functional traits in particular?
Yeah, so during my PhD work, which took me to China for a few years, I did already work on the growth responses of trees, young trees, to different light environments. And actually then, I was looking at some then famous papers for me about things like specific leaf area and growth rates and things like that. And so I compared different tree species for how, what kind of traits they had and how that helped them to grow in different successional stages of the forest. I had these experiments with shading mesh, basically mosquito netting that I bought on the market. And that's when I already kind of started to work on traits a bit, but I wasn't sort of into this multi-species approach that people already had been doing at the unit of comparative plant ecology, you know, the Phil Grime group.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got there, then I really got soaked into this in this environment, absorbed in this environment of comparative plant ecology, sort of in its purest sense, in a way, you know, comparing all these different species for what they do and what traits they have. So that was for me the big step, I think, to what I'm still doing now, in a way. Yeah.
I actually recall the first time we ever met was, I think, in the late 90s, and
I remember that.
Yeah, we went to a woodland outside Sheffield by a railway station, I seem to remember, collecting litter for decomposition experiments. So I remember that. But how did you actually come to go to Sheffield then? Because that must have been, as you say, quite a formative experience for you.
Yes, it was. Well, actually, it was a bit weird because by the time I almost finished my PhD at Utrecht University in Holland, it was actually a gruesome period for biologists to find a job. It was really at the low of the low in terms of jobs for ecologists and biologists in general. And so actually, I had been sending out letters, and I wasn't quite sure exactly which way I wanted to go. I wanted to do research, but I wasn't sure about what opportunities were around. And so on the one hand, I sent letters out for ecological consultancies, even though I wasn't sure that was really me, but to make a living for the time being, perhaps. And then at the same time, a few of these things came up that I saw in journals like Nature, job adverts, and this was one of those adverts that I just saw, and at the unit of comparative plant ecology for a postdoc for 2 years on an EU project. And I thought, oh wow, that sounds really exciting, but I didn't really think that I had a single chance to actually get the job. So I sent a letter to the unit of UCPE, and I forgot all about it because I just assumed that I didn't qualify enough, and I didn't have any top publications at that time at all. I was quite a mediocre kind of ecologist. And then I went to the BES meeting once in Britain to give a talk about my PhD work. And then afterwards, a stranger came to me, who later became a great friend, Ken Thompson, a UCPE person, and he said, "Oh, so I understand you are our new postdoc." And I said, "I beg your pardon." Yeah, we've just decided to hire you as a postdoc, and I was completely, flabbergasted. So then I had to talk to my wife at home, who's British and had just got used to living in Holland and was really happy in Holland. And then she had to move back to Britain, so we had to do some discussion at home. But she was actually very happy in the end, of course. So that's how it started, sort of as a complete surprise, and yeah.
Yeah, I know, and of course you were working also with Phil Grime at the time, which must have been quite an experience, and I guess you must have learned a lot from Phil. I mean, maybe you could say a little bit about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's he was such an inspiring guy. So I think what I learned from him was, that in order to do something interesting, you have to be brave to think big, to do wild things and come up with a wild plan and then just make it happen somehow, whatever the cost. That was very much Phil. He had a big plan, and then even the secretary would come out to do the field work in order, the whole unit would be involved in setting up these huge experiments at Buxton Climate Change Laboratory, for example. It was, but yeah, so the sky is the limit, that kind of thinking. But actually, I must also add that, of course, Phil was like the big engine there and the big, the central person. But other people there, actually, like Ken Thompson and John Hodgson and Rod Hunt, they were also amazing scientists, with a lot of their own good ideas. And so UCP, maybe to the outside world, was very much Phil Grime et al. But to me, it was the whole group. There were a lot of people there with exceptionally novel ideas. I think that's also nice to emphasize, or important to emphasize.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember visiting just for a day or two, and it was quite an experience, certainly in my career. And I think that thing about the big ideas was something I certainly took from it as well. I mean, and another time I remember meeting you, we seem to bump into each other these
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
at Stockholm Airport. I think you were going up to Abisko, and I was going up
That's
to
right.
Svalbard. And I mean, some of the papers you've selected are on your work on Arctic ecology. So again, I mean, how did you get to start working in the Arctic? And
My life is always, it just sort of takes me to places just by accident, I think, you know,
right.
because well, you probably, yeah, you remember that UCPE basically lost its national funding, its NERC funding, while I was there. So I had, yeah, some really nice years there, but then basically the UCPE stopped to exist. And then I had to look for a new position, like everybody there. And then out of the blue, Terry Callaghan phoned me up because he was running the Sheffield Arctic Centre at Sheffield University as well. And while I was still at UCP, but coming towards the end of my contract, he said, you know, how about doing a postdoc with me for a couple of years on Arctic ecology? And you know, I didn't think twice. I thought, wow, you know, this is another dream come true, because I remember when I was still a student, like 1983 or so, a long time ago, I actually went to Abisko to go hiking in the mountain with a friend, you know, with a backpack and a tent. And I still remember that we, you know, on the way into the mountains, we passed Abisko Research Station. And we looked at the building and we said to each other, you know, oh, if only, you know, we could be working here in the future. You know, it's like almost unthinkable in this fantastic place. And then suddenly, you know, this became reality with this postdoc position. So yeah, and that was actually since then, you know, the Arctic thing has always been high on my research agenda. Yeah.
And I noticed also in your collection, you've been working a lot more with Chinese scientists.
That's right.
And you mentioned you did your PhD there in China, in China. So again, I was intrigued how that work came about and how you continue with that kind of work.
How it came about again was total, you know, coincidence, like everything in my life.
Yeah.
I had, for my master degree, I had done a tropical study in Guyana, climbing trees to map the epiphyte communities in the trees. And the supervisor from that project, he came to me and he said, actually, I got some money for a PhD position, which involves 2 years in China, in the middle of basically a university, you know, pretty much in the middle of nowhere at that time. Are you interested? And it was about reforestation and about, you know, there was the thing with the mosquito netting and with the little trees. And yeah, I'm one of these people who always first says yes and then starts to think about the consequences. I basically didn't think twice and said, wow, that sounds like a fantastic opportunity. And there were a few other people who were also invited to apply, but when they found out what was involved, they gave up, and I was the only candidate left who was prepared to go to China for a few years.
Yeah.
Basically, at that time, you know, China was still not what it is now. So it was really a step, you know, like going to the moon for me, you know, like to a completely unknown place with not knowing what to expect.
Yeah, and I mean, you've listed 12 papers, and as I said at the beginning, they're quite covering a wide range of topics, working in different places that we've already covered. I mean, would you have a favorite of those 12?
Yes, I definitely have a favorite, and I don't know whether it's sad or nice, but it actually is one of my first, maybe it's probably my first Journal of Ecology paper. So it's not that I haven't done anything interesting since, but still, you know. So that is the paper in '96, which is basically the first multi-species litter decomposition study, where I try to link decomposition rates of different species to functional traits. Although at that time I didn't call them that, but basically the functional properties of the different species.
Yeah.
So I already looked at things like specific leaf area, but also leaf litter colors, for example. I sort of started doing this work by going out into the field collecting leaf litter of different species, and then I got intrigued by all the autumn colors of these shrubs and trees, and also started to think, you know, what actually do they signify? You know, the fact that some species drop their leaves when they're still green, like alder and ash and things like that.
Yeah.
And other species like beech, they drop their leaves brown, and yeah, so I started to think more about, you know, the functional traits that sort of, yeah, could explain what, you know, whether a leaf decomposes fast or slowly in the soil.
Right. Yeah.
And then sort of as I went, you know, once you start to collect litter, it's difficult to stop. You always want more and more. So I actually became addicted to litter collecting. So,
right, which is when I met you in the
collecting
litter.
And I did get help by people like Ken Thompson and John Hodgson, who also helped to collect a lot. But still, I just couldn't stop collecting. So I ended up with about 125 species.
Yeah.
That then became the first litter bed study, because I really first didn't know how to then, you know, incubate, how to compare all these different species. And then just walking around in Tapton Gardens, which was a botanical garden associated with the uni in Sheffield, I saw a huge pile of leaf mold lying around there, with all these, you know, different species of tree and shrub litter, and I thought, oh, maybe it would be nice to put all my litter bags in there, you know. So basically, I collected that stuff and spread it out into a layer, and then put all the leaf litter bags inside, pre-weighed, and then that was kind of the first big litter bed. And and it was in a way super primitive and basic, but that then sort of was the start of all these litter bed studies, which people still do all over the world now. So that's why I'm still very happy that about that paper, because it seems, you know, once it's there, it seems so obvious that it's almost embarrassing, so simple, but at that time nobody did it. So
absolutely,
still interesting.
It's a paper I often use citing in my research, because it does demonstrate the role of traits in decomposition in a sort of excellent way, very simple but also very important findings. But I also use it a lot in teaching. Slides in that particular paper, which brings me on to the topic of teaching, because I know teaching is a very important part of your job, and I just wondered if you could say a bit about how you mix your teaching and research.
Yeah, well, on the one hand, it's always a juggle, right? Because we're like you know, this life is busy in academia, so it's always managing everything, and that also includes the teaching. But on the other hand, it's also really nice to sort of have the link with between teaching and research. And I always feel that while you teach certain topics and courses, you know, you also get ideas that relate to your own research. So, for example, I teach a course, a bachelor course on evolution of plants, and you know, there I also teach about the Mesozoic, you know, the dinosaur time, and what kind of different plants there were around, and different conifer groups, and how they were protected against dinosaur browsing and things like that. And through that teaching, you know, I got ideas about, you know, looking at the carbon cycle in the Mesozoic, you know, going back all the way to the past, and how the traits of different species back then could have influenced the carbon cycle, you know, via their defense traits against dinosaurs, for example. And it's I can really, and actually I have worked actively on these issues, comparing all these different conifer species with different traits of different clades, you know, that really you can trace back all the way to the Mesozoic era. So actually, I do think that teaching that course every year helped to sort of get those ideas, right? And right now I'm teaching, I'm right in the middle of a master course with 50 master students. And last week we came back from a whole field week away where all the students do all their little research projects on really wide-ranging topics. And it's always really nice that, you know, sometimes students come up with these wild ideas, which turn out to be really interesting, and sometimes they can become like pilot studies for something that you can take a bit further. And so right now, as I speak, there are 3 students working in my fire lab, or our fire lab, I should say, where we look at the flammability and fire responses of different plant species. And they have just they're now busy with a creme brulee burner, where to look at how the bark conducts heat, during a fire. And they have a fantastic setup to look at the heat conductance and in relation to the bark thickness of different species. And so they are very creative at designing this experiment, and that's, for me, that could be a starting point of a different line of fire research. Because we're looking a lot at flammability of litter of different species, but looking at the fire tolerance of different species is kind of something that we haven't done a lot on. And through these little student projects, sometimes you can get really nice ideas about what you could do in that field.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That leads me nicely on to my next question, which is talking about the future of the field. I mean, plant functional traits, plant functional ecology has become enormously popular, I guess, as a field. In the journal, we published many papers in that area. So I just wondered how you see the field developing in terms of what you would see are the bigger, the big future challenges in that area.
Yeah. Well, one of them you will agree with straight away is, of course, that we should go below ground more.
Absolutely.
Because in the plant trait world, there is still bias towards, what is easier to measure above ground. And for example, especially mycorrhizal associations are super important when you talk about carbon storage, for example, in the soil. And I think that's really, really important. So any basically below ground traits are very important. Yeah.
It's a funny noise in the background. I don't know whether it's coming from my computer or
unknown user.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, that's sort of, again, that's about on the research. I mean, a lot of younger people now are wanting to get involved in ecology. I think people are beginning to see the importance of ecology for providing evidence to address big challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. And I guess it'd be interesting to hear from you what your advice would be to an early career scientist now wanting to enter the field of plant ecology or ecology in general.
Of course, there are so many fields within plant ecology that are all super interesting, and you can either go into depth, and really look at, for example, the molecular mechanisms that underpin functional traits and functioning of plants. But you can also go broader instead and look more into ecosystem level responses to, for example, all these extremes of climate that we are experiencing now, like drought and flood and fire. And carbon, of course, carbon will be around for the next few decades, but really look at the underlying processes. For example, below ground, as we said, mycorrhizas, etc. But also, I think, what we started with, sort of go out and observe and just be inspired by what you see out there in nature. And we also need fundamentally new ideas, so just going out and having fun and observing and, thinking freely about what you see around you in nature. I think that's also super important for any young ecologist, not just think about, about papers and impacts. I know there is a lot of pressure, for people to publish, PhD students, postdocs, but also, don't forget to enjoy the process and to go out and have fun and observe. I think only if you really like what you do, when you have a real passion for what you do, you can also do novel stuff, and so don't only think about the serious side of science, but also about the fun. That's very important, I think.
Absolutely. And I've just got one more question, actually, and it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning when you said that you were particularly interested in ornithology. And I was going to ask you if you could start again in your career, would you study the same thing, i.e. plant functional traits, or would you have done something, or would you do something different?
No, actually, I feel extremely lucky that my career just went as it went by accident. But and I think what I've been doing now actually has been very rewarding for me, and bird watching is still a great passion that I can always do on the side while out there. So no, so I wouldn't. I think I would have done exactly the same again. Actually, yeah, I feel that I've been luckier than I deserve, but I'll have it anyway.
Well, very modest as ever. But well, on that note, thank you very much, Hans, and many congratulations on this award, which is actually much deserved.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm very honored, and I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you very much.